declaration of a national emergency at our southern border. This as the move has now prompted pushback on Capitol Hill and lawsuits from landowners in at least one border state, and more lawsuits are on the way. Hello, everyone, and welcome to America's News Headquarters. I'm Eric Shawn.
And I'm Laura Ingle in for Arthel Neville. Great to be back with you today, Eric. The president is sparking a showdown in Congress as Democrats vow an aggressive response to his declaration, and some Republicans join them. House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy isn't one of them.
So the president, one, has the authority. Yes, it is an emergency that has been shown before. And I believe at the end of the day, this wall is going to be built, not sea to shining sea, but about 200 miles.
Ellison Barber joins us at the White House with the very latest. Hi, Ellison.
Hi, Laura. We are over on Capitol Hill, the White House, of course, not too far from us, and that's where so much of this news is happening. But it's also happening here on Capitol Hill, and President Trump declared the national emergency within hours, really. Lawyers had already filed a legal challenge. We know that more are on the way. We expect to see those in the coming days. Democrats here on Capitol Hill, they say that the president overstepped, that he is violating the Constitution, and that the National Emergency Act was not meant for this.
Is this the first time a president has tried to declare an emergency when Congress explicitly rejected funding for the particular project that the president is advocating? If we give away, if we surrender the power of the purse, which is our most important power, there will be little check and no balance left. It'll not be a separation of powers anymore, just a separation of parties. So this is going to be a moment of truth for my GOP colleagues.
The administration maintains this is an appropriate use of presidential power, and they say if lawmakers don't like it, they should change the statute.
They didn't refuse to appropriate it. They passed a law specifically saying the president could have this authority. It's in the plain statute. That's a decision that Congress made. And if people don't like that, they can address it. This would not be even an issue if the president was invoking that statute to support some foreign adventure overseas. We do operations to destroy drug fields and foreign lands in Afghanistan or in Colombia, and we can't even deal with the criminal cartels operating on our border.
Some Republicans, like Senators Marco Rubio, Ron Johnson, and Rand Paul, are skeptical, or in the words of Senator Paul, disappointed. Senator Susan Collins says the emergency declaration is a mistake, one that undermines the role of Congress and is of dubious constitutionality. But many other Republicans are siding with President Trump here. As for the legal challenge, as officials in California hinted at a multi-state lawsuit on Friday, today Attorney General Javier Becerra said that California will definitely file a lawsuit and that it is imminent. Laura?
All right, Ellison Barber for us, covering a lot of ground in Washington for us. Thank you so much, Ellison. All right, Eric.
Well, Laura, now to what we're told is an escalating situation at our southern border, as an estimated 1,600 Central American migrants are right now waiting in Mexico for their asylum claims to be processed. Border Patrol agents say some of them are not waiting, and they are trying to cross into our country illegally. Jackie Heinrich is live at the border in Eagle Pass, Texas, with more. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, Eric. We could see an influx this week. Mexican authorities just announced they will be closing on Wednesday the makeshift shelter where some 1,600 Central American migrants have been housed for more than 2 weeks now. Government officials began breaking up the large caravan by busing groups to other border cities hundreds of miles away. About 400 of those people have already been taken to other states, but about 1,500 migrants now have papers that let them move about freely in Mexico. 70 people were deported back to their home countries. Now with the shelter closing, many of those migrants will likely continue trying to cross into the U.S. to seek asylum. Mexican authorities explained why they're closing the shelter.
Given the conditions we have right now, the advances in registrations, the advances in providing documents, the peace process, and the fact that many who were ill when they arrived have been or are being treated, the purpose of the shelter is practically concluded.
Tensions have been rising in the shelter for the last several days. The migrants were being held in a warehouse with scarce supplies and long wait times. At one point, a group of 100 of them clashed with Mexican federales, upset that they weren't being allowed to leave to shop at nearby stores.
I tell you what, we never should have come here. We should have walked across there to the United States. Because if they don't give you the credential for a humanitarian visa, you're never getting out of the shelter.
Where the migrants will attempt to cross is another issue. Border Patrol in Eagle Pass says since the caravan arrived, they've had a spike in river rescues. 17 people were rescued from the river on just one day last week. But for those who are going to try to enter the U.S. legally, the wait is going to be indefinite. Only about 20 people get brought to Eagle Pass each day to have their asylum cases heard because resources here, Eric, are just so scarce. Back to you.
It's a long process. Jackie, thank you. Laura?
And for more on this, we want to bring in former acting ICE Director Tom Homan, who's also a Fox News contributor. Great to have you here today, sir.
How you doing?
All right, so I think everyone can agree we have a difficult situation at the southern border, right? We have for decades. Everyone has been weighing in. I want to play you a clip of what radio talk show host Rush Limbaugh had to say today on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace. Listen.
We have an emergency. This is an invasion. The very existence and definition of American culture, American society, the rule of law. Why does nobody talk about the fact that millions and millions and millions of people are breaking the law, coming here illegally, and that the Democrat Party wants that to happen? We can't have the breakdown of rule of law and law and order this way. That alone would suggest that this has gone on way too long.
All right, so one of the many big voices out there, but with your area of expertise being the former acting director of ICE, you see what's happening today. Is this a national emergency? And do you think this was the right call to make at this time?
Well, yeah, I think it's a national emergency. I agree 100% with what Rush just said. Look, the difference is we finally have a president. We finally have a president that recognizes this emergency and wants to control it. He wants to secure our borders like no other president has. They all talk the talk, but we finally got a president who walks the walk and wants to secure this border. So, yeah, I think it's a national emergency. I would much rather they had a continuing resolution for a week or 10 days to try to fix some of the terrible language that's in this bill. But the Democrats made it clear they're not going to give him they're not going to do another CR. They gave the president a choice: either sign this bill that's not very good or shut the government down. So this president, again, going on his own, because he has to, he decided, okay, well, I'll sign the bill, I'll do what I can through executive action, through emergency declaration, to add to the bill and try to secure this country. So, yes, I think he did the right thing.
Okay, so we know that this is going to go to the courts. We've seen the National Emergencies Act of 1976 invoked dozens of times by presidents. There has not yet been one successful legal challenge. How do you see this all but certain challenge playing out in court? President Trump, gave that play-by-play of how he predicts it will go. Where do you see the biggest challenges coming up?
Look, everything he does, everything he has done to try to secure this border and try to establish a rule of law in this country and try to protect the American people, he gets sued. So I knew that what he did is going to end up in lawsuits like it always does. I think he'll win. But I think the left, every day they want to attack him. The media wants to attack him. I think at some point they think they can wear this president down. They don't understand. This president's a warrior, and he's going to go to battle to do what he thinks is best for this country and keep the promise he made. I said he was elected based on a series of ideas that he had to secure this country, and he's going to make sure he walks that walk of saying everything I promised American people, they elected me, and I'm going to get done. And they're great things. I mean, everything he's doing it is an interest of this country. His success is his country's success. So I can't understand the constant conflict from the far left.
Okay, well, let's talk about what is happening at the border. What do you think about the National Guard troops being used there? In California, troops were sent, they were pulled back. Are troops necessary right now today? And what kind of deployment at the border, do you think that we could see moving forward as the national emergency declaration goes on?
I'm glad you asked that question, because this is a clear example of these people putting politics and their hatred of this president over their responsibilities to secure the border and protect the American people. The California governor, Governor Brown, sent troops to the border to help with this crisis. Right. If it wasn't a crisis, he wouldn't have sent his National Guard down there. The governor from New Mexico did the same thing. Now, both of these Democratic governors just recently pulled their troops back. Why? The reason they did it, because it's hard to fight the president saying there's no real emergency on the border, but we sent troops down there to help with this emergency. So they pulled those troops back for one reason only: to help their case and to sue this president. It's not for the right reasons. It's politics over public safety.
To the degree that you can tell us, what are ICE agents saying about all of this? I know obviously you're in contact with them, with more than 20,000 law enforcement and support personnel in more than 400 offices around the U.S., obviously a very large operation. There's got to be a lot of opinion about this. So what do you see as the common thread? Is there a unifying vision and voice in ICE agents today?
Yes, these are the proudest moment of my life is to lead that organization. 20,000 American patriots. These men and women, they take hate every day from the media. You know, you got people want to abolish ICE, but you know, they come to work every day. They strap their gun to their hip every day to do what's right for this country, and they support this president. They supported him during the shutdown. They weren't getting paid, and they still support him because they know, like me, they've been around for decades, seeing this thing, you know, just simmer and simmer and simmer. Now it's to the point that something needs to be done, and they know they have a president that can fix this. The first president is willing to take on all the hate to fix this border and secure the border. So they're 100% behind him. I hear from them every day.
Okay, Tom Homan, got to leave it right there. Thank you so much for your perspective. Always greatly appreciated. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, thanks, Tom.
Well, it's help wanted. U.S. United Nations ambassador. You know, the president's choice to replace Nikki Haley, Heather Nauert, is withdrawing her name from consideration. And now there is speculation the UN veteran ambassador to Germany, Rick Grenell, could get that nod. Who could it be? And there's more of Andrew McCabe's bombshell interview with 60 Minutes ahead, what the former deputy FBI director is saying about the president and the Russia investigation. We'll have new details and reaction coming up.
I was very concerned that I was able to put the Russia case on absolutely solid ground in an indelible fashion, that were I removed quickly or reassigned or fired, that the case could not be closed or vanish in the night without a trace.
About trying to find if we could replace the president under the 25th Amendment. We're a democracy. People enforce the law, can't take it in their own hands. And was this an attempted bureaucratic coup? I don't know.
Okay, Senate Judiciary Committee Chairman Republican Lindsey Graham this morning reacting to new clips of a stunning interview with former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe. McCabe telling 60 Minutes that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein discussed with him the potential for removing President Trump from office by invoking the 25th Amendment. Mr. Rosenstein had repeatedly denied that, and there are new reports that two cabinet members allegedly were ready to support invoking the 25th Amendment to try and remove him. Phil Keating is in West Palm Beach, Florida, near the president's Mar-a-Lago estate. Hi, Phil.
Good afternoon. President Trump's motorcade departed his winter White House over at Mar-a-Lago on Palm Beach and made its way to the Trump International Golf Club, arriving around 9 a.m. this morning. No cameras are allowed, so we can only presume he is golfing as he did yesterday. Yesterday afternoon, he also met in person and over the phone with his trade team regarding ongoing negotiations with China. More of those talks are expected today, and there is much talk in Washington today about the morning political shows, about tonight's upcoming 60 Minutes interview with former acting FBI Director Andrew McCabe, where he candidly talks about the time right after President Trump fired former FBI Director James Comey. McCabe says he discussed with the FBI's top lawyer, James Baker, and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein about possibly invoking the 25th Amendment to remove the president and even secretly recording the president over concerns about his actions and motives about Russia and U.S. policy.
Discussion of the 25th Amendment was simply Rod raised the issue and discussed it with me in the context of thinking about how many other cabinet officials might support such an effort. It was just another kind of topic that he jumped to in the midst of a wide-ranging conversation.
Now, according to Baker, Rosenstein told him that some cabinet officials were also ready to remove Trump from office. These allegations are receiving a lot of skepticism in Washington today, as McCabe is also pushing his new book. This afternoon, like I mentioned, President Trump will again engage in trade talks about China with his trade team. They have meetings this week with the Chinese delegation. Tomorrow, the president will make his way to Miami to give a speech and a rally on Venezuela, supporting the opposition leader Juan Guaido, and also talking about, as the White House puts it, the scourge of socialism. Back to you.
All right, Phil Keating for us live in West Palm Beach, Florida. Thanks so much.
So, what about this claim that some cabinet members were on board to possibly remove the president? John Sale is here. He's a former assistant special Watergate prosecutor and former special assistant to the Attorney General. So, John, let me be very specific. The report is that former top FBI lawyer James Baker testified in closed-door session of Congress that he allegedly discussed invoking the 25th Amendment to remove the president from office, claiming he was told that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein said that 2 Trump cabinet members, 2, were ready to support such an effort. What do you make of this?
I agree with Senator Graham, who said that this is stunning. I think it's a threat to our democracy. We remove presidents. It doesn't matter whether you agree with President Trump or you support him or you don't. We remove presidents at the ballot box. We have an election coming up shortly in 2020. In unusual circumstances, the House Judiciary Committee can consider impeachment, but a small group of people, either in the FBI or the top of the Justice Department, to even contemplate this is really shocking. The 25th Amendment was ratified after the assassination and death of President Kennedy, really to clarify succession. And there is a provision that deals with if a president is disabled or unable to perform his duties. It does not contemplate removing a president because he fired the FBI director. I mean, this does sound like the beginning of talking about a coup, and obviously something never happened, and I think that both Mr. Rosenstein and Mr. McCabe need to testify under oath so we get to the bottom of this.
Is it possible that there was genuine alarm, perhaps, over the president's behavior, his demeanor, what he says in private meetings, or the fact that he fired Comey believing there was obstruction of justice and that he was trying to stop the Russia investigation? Is it possible that there was legitimate concern at the top of the government, whether in the FBI, the DOJ, or among those alleged 2 cabinet members, that there was something wrong, that something had to be done? Is that sufficient?
Well, they actually started a counterintelligence investigation. But my question is, who authorized that? If the president was acting as an asset of a foreign government, did they go to the Joint Chiefs? Did they go to the congressional leadership? I mean, again, it's a small group of people. You're saying, was there legitimate concern? Well, this was reported by the New York Times 6 months ago. Obviously, nothing came of it. The story is now getting legs. You can't leave this to be decided by a small group of people in a democracy.
And how do we know? How do we know if it's even true? I mean, this comes from Baker saying allegedly that Rosenstein told him. So it's like, double hearsay. Wouldn't we know who these 2 cabinet members would be if indeed wouldn't they be named? Would the natural question in closed-door session of Congress to say 2 cabinet members are ready to invoke the 25th Amendment? Mr. Baker, who were they? Wouldn't he name them?
Well, those actually have been named in the media. I'm not going to repeat them here because I just don't think we should give it any credibility. But again, that's why they should testify under oath. And the thought of wearing a wire with the President of the United States, I mean, both as a prosecutor and as a longtime defense lawyer, I know when you wear a wire. I mean, if Mr. Rosenstein even talked about that, even in jest, the Deputy Attorney General should not joke about going into the Oval Office wearing a wire in a meeting with the President of the United States to try and set him up.
He says it was in jest. I mean, do you buy that?
I don't know, but you don't joke about that. You and I possibly could joke about it over a beer, but if you're the Deputy Attorney General sitting in the Department of Justice wearing that great hat with the Lady Justice, the scales, you don't joke about wearing a wire with the president. I mean, people might differ with that, but I just don't find it humorous.
Yeah, McCabe's interview has caused so much news. He seems to be walking back, or his spokesperson walking back some of his claims. Here's what Melissa Schwartz tweeted out about that in Mr. McCabe's name, saying, quote, "Certain statements made by Mr. McCabe in interviews associated with the release of his book have been taken out of context and misrepresented. To clarify, at no time did Mr. McCabe participate in any extended discussions about the use of the 25th Amendment, nor he is aware of any such discussions. He was present and participated in a discussion that included a comment by Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein regarding the 25th Amendment. This anecdote was not included in the threat, Mr. McCabe's book. Mr. McCabe has merely confirmed a discussion that was initially reported elsewhere." So now the spokesman says it was an anecdote and it was just a comment and nothing to be taken seriously, and it's not the case.
Well, the spokesperson is also saying no extended discussions, which means there were some discussions. But, you know, McCabe can't have it both ways. He's getting incredible exposure by 60 Minutes devoting a segment to plugging his book. So did it happen or didn't it? I think he should be brought in under oath.
Is it possible that they know something that we don't? They suspected something that we don't? They had legitimate fears about something that we don't know? Or was it to you their emotion and dislike of the president and his supporters say that led them to this?
Well, they definitely had these suspicions, but the real question is, were they reasonable? Were they based in fact? And there had to be a mechanism above their heads to authorize this and determine whether it was reasonable or it was just total not agreeing with the president. You don't form a little cabal of people, invoke the 25th Amendment because you disagree with the president's foreign policy, because you're unhappy that he fired your boss. That's not what American democracy is all about. You remove a president by voting for someone else.
John Sale, former Watergate prosecutor, veteran of the Justice Department. John, thank you for your service to this country, and thank you for your insight today.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Laura?
Well, President Trump's choice for UN ambassador withdrawing her name from consideration. Heather Nauert, State Department spokeswoman, says she made the decision for the best interest of her family. Jillian Turner is live in Washington with more on this developing story. Hi, Jillian.
Good afternoon, Laura. Sources tell Fox News Nauert's decision to withdraw her nomination resulted primarily from concern over her past employment of a nanny who wasn't legally allowed to work in the United States. If true, the nanny in question lacked the appropriate work visa required to do the job for which Nauert had hired her. The State Department hasn't confirmed this element of the story to Fox News. They've said only that the nominating process, on top of traveling around the world and back and forth from D.C. to New York, grew to be too much. This echoes what Nauert herself said in a statement. She said, "The past 2 months have been grueling for my family, and therefore it's in the best interest of my family that I withdraw my name from consideration." It's unclear whether she'll retain her role as spokesperson for the State Department or not, though a subsequent statement from her boss, Secretary Pompeo, seemed to bid her farewell. He said, "I wish Heather nothing but the best in all of her future endeavors and know that she will continue to be a great representative of this nation in whatever role she finds herself." President Trump had selected her from a handful of candidates back in early December.
Heather Nauert will be nominated. She's going to work with Nikki Haley to replace Nikki at the United Nations.
As for the vacant position itself, a State Department spokesperson says the president will make an announcement with respect to a nominee for U.S. ambassador to the UN soon. Other nominees in the pipeline now include some names President Trump had previously considered. There are Kelly Craft, current ambassador to Canada, Rick Grenell, ambassador to Germany, former National Security aide Dina Powell, and John James, former Senate candidate from Michigan. Laura?
All right, Jillian Turner for us. Thank you so much for that report. Eric?
Meanwhile, a second wave of humanitarian aid from our country and our government to Venezuela has arrived now along the Colombia-Venezuela border. This just a week after the first wave of U.S. supplies arrived, all, of course, in response to Venezuelan interim president's request for humanitarian assistance for their people. But like a previous delivery, this vitally needed supplies, well, they're being blocked from entering the country by the forces of embattled President Nicolas Maduro. You know, he is struggling to maintain power there against growing opposition both inside and outside of that South American nation. It is not yet clear if the humanitarian aid you see that comes from our government will indeed reach the Venezuelan people. Laura?
Some 2020 Democratic candidates hitting speed bumps on the campaign trail.
We'll make this happen. And then we're there. Hold on. Tell you. It's okay.
Elizabeth Warren heckled at an event in Georgia this weekend. Details on that and where other candidates are heading today.
Whether we have Medicare for all or don't, the bottom line is people are still going to have heart attacks. They're still going to get sick. They're still going to have strokes. They're still going to be in car accidents. The question is, who's going to pay for it?
With how the race is shaping up. Hi, Anita.
Well, hi, Laura. You know, the whole goal is for these candidates to put themselves out in front of the voters early and really make an impression. Let's start with California Senator Kamala Harris. Yesterday, she made several stops in the crucial state of South Carolina, meeting with a number of female business owners. But she had a tougher time at a town hall in Columbia when a woman asked her if she was the one candidate who could beat President Trump. She answered the question in part by saying she had the unique ability to fight for justice.
And I believe this is a moment in time that we need fighters on the stage who know how to fight. I do. And also have a proven desire to lead.
Well, later, when interviewed by reporters, the woman who asked the question says she wasn't sold with that answer, but that she would continue to give Harris a chance. Meanwhile, Minnesota Senator Amy Klobuchar also hit the trail yesterday at a packed coffee house in Wisconsin. She spent a lot of time defending her yes vote on the president's spending bill that includes $1.3 billion for border barriers. Klobuchar noted the bill was very similar to legislation introduced in the fall, which had overwhelming bipartisan support. But she added she did not support a declaration of a national emergency.
And he's going to take money from emergency measures, probably, we don't know yet, but things that are really there to secure our country, whether it's things with the military or whether it's things with disaster relief, whether it is, fighting fires out in the West or protecting our lands in Florida from hurricanes.
And Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren was also out campaigning yesterday in Georgia when one man in the audience heckled her about exaggerating her Native American ancestry.
Just kind of introduce myself, who I am, a little bit of my story. We'll make this happen. So I appreciate that you're here. What I wanted to start with today is to tell you, okay.
Senator Warren will hold more events in Las Vegas today, and Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey will also be out campaigning in Manchester, New Hampshire. So, Laura, a busy President's Day weekend for those presidential candidates. Back to you.
All right, Anita Vogel for us in our West Coast newsroom. Thank you so much.
So for more on how the Democratic race is shaping up, let's go to Sagar Engheti. He's the White House correspondent at the Daily Caller. So, Sagar, I know it's early, but who's going to get the Democratic nomination?
Well, I think if I knew that, Eric, I could be a rich man right now. But right now what we see is that there's a lot of energy right now on the Democratic side for Kamala Harris. But as that answer that was illustrated in there yesterday, there doesn't seem to be yet a positive vision that's issues-based. It seems to be intertwined in a personality fight with the president. And a lot of analysts have looked at that and they said the president usually prevails whenever it comes down to these things, and that Democratic candidates need to be looking more towards a positive economic and trade mission like you see with Amy Klobuchar and with Elizabeth Warren.
Well, with the difference between Kamala Harris and Amy Klobuchar, we're told, is that Senator Klobuchar is more moderate. She has disputed some of that. So this could basically get down to a fight, as we already see, between the more leftist progressives and the more moderates.
Right. It's a dual fight that the Democrats are fighting here. They have to look both at the primary electorate, which is overwhelmingly progressive, and much of the media and the donor base that exists in that space. And then they also have to try and win back states like Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, Florida, or try to make, North Carolina a competitive state. These are not necessarily places where calls for Medicare for all or for less enforcement at the border is going to go over well. So it's a very difficult needle that they need to thread, both in on getting the nomination and then eventually trying to win the general election.
And the first stop, of course, the Democratic caucuses in Iowa in January. Let's take a look at the recent Real Clear Politics average of the candidates. And there is Joe Biden way ahead. He's got double that of Bernie Sanders. He's at 31%. Mr. Sanders, the senator, at 14. Senator Harris, 7.8. Beto, who's not even announced yet, 6.5. Elizabeth Warren at 6%. And if you go down and see Cory Booker, he's at 4, and Klobuchar is at 3%. This is from the beginning of January, middle of January to February 10th. Are you surprised at any of those numbers?
No, they're not necessarily surprising, because when you're this far out of those elections, what you see is that this is a matter of name recognition. You know, Senator Sanders is somebody who beat the drum in Iowa throughout the 2016 campaign. He has existing infrastructure. Joe Biden, obviously, has been a fixture of our national politics for almost 40 years, and he was the vice president of the United States, tied to the Obama administration, who is well received in the Iowa Democratic electorate. So it's a matter of name recognition. As these things start to bear out, as the campaign trail starts to go on, in a matter of months, we're going to see what the emerging field really starts to look like.
How does former Vice President Biden thread the needle? I mean, he's got to appeal to the progressives. At the same time, keep that moderate base of his. What does he do to come out of this and to get the nomination?
Well, he hasn't tried necessarily at this point. I mean, he's right now at the Munich Security Conference delivering foreign policy speech. He's bearing up on his more traditional credentials, but in much of it, I mean, he did write that, or I think he did come out in support of a Republican candidate. He has rejected the idea of all-out fights and all-out opposition to the Republican Party. So it's not that he's trying to thread the needle, and I think he's banking on the fact that he has his name ID, he has his tradition.